All right, there he is. He is the aguardiente to my guajabo. I saw Danny this weekend in my hometown. I'm on Instagram, and I see his story. He's in D.C., and I'm like, wow, this fool came all the way to my city and didn't even tell me, but we did actually end up meeting up, and you were hungover in ways that are hard to describe. Is that
Very, yes. I'm feeling a lot better now. You know, as soon as I got to Brooklyn, had a nice juice.
Yeah.
Put in water, rehydrated.
Yep.
Feeling a lot better.
Now, 2 questions for you. One, what did you think of D.C.?
I liked it. It's a weird town, man. It's weird. It feels like a small town, but it's obviously the capital of the U.S.
Yeah.
So it kind of reminds me of where, I grew up, in South Florida. Like, there's so much green, and it kind of feels very suburby, but, like, at the same time, it's a big city. And also, like, you go around D.C. and, like, different parts look completely different, too, which I thought it was pretty cool.
You got to see all the sites? You got to see the Lincoln Memorial and the Washington Monument?
I was there.
That's cool, man.
Yeah. It was awesome. First time. I've been to DC before, but I was only there. I only stayed there overnight, and then I left in the morning. So I didn't get to go to all the monuments and stuff like that. So it was nice to definitely do that.
All right. And then the last question for you was, what did you drink that made you so hungover?
What didn't I drink, bro?
You mix it all together?
Tito's vodka was in there. Beer. Took a shot of Jameson whiskey.
Yeah, buddy.
It was a whole mixture, man. So
you were getting after it. All right. Well, without further ado, let's talk about these calls. So here's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
We'll do the calls for this week first.
Okay.
And let's pick up what we missed towards the end.
All right.
Deal?
Sounds good. Yeah.
All right. What do we got?
All right, well, let's start off with the main event of this weekend. Let's talk about Alexander Gustafsson. People have a lot of questions about him and where he could potentially go next. I mean, safe to say this is a career-defining moment for him, right?
It's a huge moment for him.
Huge moment.
Not as big for Anthony Smith. Big for him, too.
Exactly.
Because a win or a loss, a win would be huge, and a loss would not be great, but at the end of the world. But for Alexander Gustafsson, ooh, this is big.
Exactly, yeah. So let's discuss that.
Hey, Luke and Danny. My name is Amir, and I'm calling from Stockholm, Sweden. How are you today?
Good. Awful.
Awesome, you donk. So, Gustafsson's fighting Anthony Smith this week here in Stockholm. I just want to ask you about Gustafsson and what do you think he goes from here? Win or lose on Saturday, because he's had 3 title shots already. And, I don't mind seeing him get a 4th one because he's such an entertaining fighter. But, what do you think his career should go from here, win or lose? Thanks.
Well,
all right. So let's say he wins, picks up a nice win over Anthony Smith, who's super game, super tough, obviously a top contender. What happens with Alexander Gustafsson?
I think he probably still has a couple more wins to get before they can even talk about a title shot.
Yeah.
It would also depend on whether John Jones moves up and they create an interim one, or if there's some other kind of scenario. But this idea that these guys are both coming off John Jones losses.
Mm-hmm.
A win here means nothing for getting back to him in any kind of short time frame. Long-term time frame, yeah, of course, it's obviously valuable. But to me, this is just about ascertaining, is he still the best light heavyweight not named Daniel Cormier and John Jones? Does he still occupy that space? And he very well might. I literally do, I just don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. But if he loses, then the answer is pretty clearly not. And then you've got some real tough questions to ask. Because you could have said the same thing about Rumble, but Rumble moved on, so that he default kept that similar position. So it's a big, big, big fight. Huge fight.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to agree with you. I don't think there's any other storyline or anything else here in the sense of Gustafsson for the longest time has been the guy, not named John Jones or Daniel Cormier, but he's come so close several times. But for sure, he's been a top contender, and that's very hard to do, man. That's very hard to do to stay at that level. And I think this fight either keeps his status as who he is, or it could potentially. I'm not saying the beginning of the end here, but it could steer his career into a different direction. So,
and also you got to remember, some of these fighters like RDA, they're like, look, if I don't think I can be champion, I don't want to keep doing this. Now, I'm not suggesting that's how he feels, but I don't. There's an open question about how, Clay Guida, I think, just wants to compete as long as he can compete. Mm-hmm. Nothing wrong with either worldview. I make no judgments about it. Whatever is right for both fighters. But I don't think that Gustafsson's one of these guys who's like, I'll just compete as long as I can. I think he wants to compete at a certain level. And once that drops off, whatever that level might be, then he starts to make some different choices about it.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll push back a little bit on the title picture. I feel like Jon Jones being so active and him having a big name. Say for example, I don't know, Gustafsson picks a nice win here, picks up another win over like a top guy, say like a Luke Rockhold at 205 or something. Dude, I think he's right back in there. And knowing Jon and seeing how he's operating now, I feel like with the title shots rolling and him just taking on the top contender every time, I think it's possible we might see a third fight.
I can't say no because the division's so thin.
Yeah.
On the other hand, something just feels anticlimactic about it. I don't know,
Yeah, that's true. What do you think happens if he loses? Do you think title shot is done for him, or where do you think he stands?
What happens to him if he loses?
Yeah, if he loses.
Gustafsson?
Yeah.
Like, let's say he gets blown out.
Mm-hmm.
Man, we'll have to ask. I mean, I would worry about his long-term future, given what he has said, if that's the case.
Yeah.
On this show, he said if he can't beat guys like Smith, he might not want to do it anymore. I'm not making it up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what he said. All right, let's talk about another fighter who is no longer with the UFC.
Oh, I think I know what this is.
What's up, Luke? My name's Gabe from PA. Love the show.
Thank you.
I was just wondering if I could get your thoughts on Elias Theodorou being released from the UFC. It's a little odd, he's 8-3 in the UFC. He was ranked number 15. He only had his one loss in the last 2-3 years, just this past month. And it's a little strange. I'm definitely not a fan, really, or going to go back and watch any of his fights anytime soon, but it's just odd to release him, considering he was pretty much doing his job, winning fights and everything. But I was just wondering if I could get your thoughts. Thank you.
All right, well, to the fighters, I mean, I'm not blaming Elias for this specifically, but generally they don't want to work together for mutual benefit. So as a consequence, the promoter, when they decide they no longer have use for you, whatever that may be, this is what's going to happen. I don't advocate that as a worldview that we should love. I advocate that as a fact of existence that we have to acknowledge. Two different things. I'm not saying, oh, that's a great idea, that the UFC can just get rid of you whenever they feel like it. But here's the reality. They basically can. So if you guys, as a fighters, don't want to do anything about that, this is going to keep happening, number one. Number two, everyone kind of got this one wrong, Danny.
Yeah.
People kept saying, oh, they got rid of him because he wasn't entertaining enough. I think that's part of the story. Like, don't get me wrong. A fighter not necessarily offering a high entertainment quotient as a competitor. It's not like UFC brass didn't notice that. They noticed that and they probably didn't like it. But there's another layer to that, which is when he got to the UFC, I think he had 11 fights in the UFC total, something like that?
Yeah.
When he got to the UFC, he's 30-31 now. When he got there, he was 25 or so. What did we talk about with Sage Northcutt? At some point, you're going to have 20 total fights.
Yeah.
He'll have in the next couple of years or so, depending on his competition schedule. He'll be about 25 years old. Sage Northcutt will be. You'll basically know what you have at that point. 20 pro fights, either you're going to be something or you're not. That's what you're going to be, right? We either kind of know. I think what the UFC said was, yes, this guy wins, and he wins because he slows down the fight. He's hard to hurt. There's a lot of competitively, it's a weird challenge and puzzle for guys.
Yeah.
He was 3-1 in his last 4. The issue for me is, in addition to there not necessarily being a high entertainment quotient, the other problem was that as a prospect from 25 to 30-31, there just wasn't a lot of technical maturation. They're probably willing to say a prospect who could be very good, who's not all that entertaining right now, will tolerate it. But at 30, 31 years old, your time is up. Either you're going to develop into something that they want to see or you're not. And at that point, if that's all that there is, which is a guy who's good, who can win fights, don't get me wrong, MMA media loves Elias because he's a very nice guy. He's smart. He's easy to engage. He advocates on behalf of important causes. We all like him. But if I'm sort of reading the UFC brass's mind, there wasn't enough entertainment and there wasn't enough technical development. If that's all you got, that's a problem.
Yeah, I would agree. I think his style definitely didn't help him. If he was, say, like a Mike Perry type or something like that, maybe we'd be having a different conversation. But I think you're on point about, his maturation and where he's at. Because at the end of the day, like, the UFC's paying fighters to fight, right? But I think they also see that as an investment, right? And we see that in soccer all the time. You know, you get somebody that's, 22, 23, and they might not have it all, right? But like soccer clubs are looking at what the kid could be in a few years, right? And, if you have the same issues or the same characteristics once, that player is older, then all of a sudden you're like, wait, is it worth, the investment? Keep this guy on the payroll, and we can just do the same thing for a younger guy that might turn out into something else. So, definitely on that. But it is weird because he is coming off his first co-main event was his last fight. And so it kind of felt like there was some investment there. And, he say what you want about his style, but like, he does have a pretty big following in the game, and people know who he is, He's got one of the best Twitter games in MMA.
Sure.
So, I don't know. It was a weird one.
I don't think it's that weird.
No?
It's weird because he has a winning record, 8-3 in the UFC.
He was ranked too.
He was ranked. I understand.
Yeah.
But like, dude, he loses to who? Derek Brunson, loses to Thiago Santos, and then Brad Tavares. What's the commonality there? There's a top 10 guys at certain points in their career. In some cases, top 5. If every time you bump up against that, you drop, they're just like, all right, well then this is all it's going to be. Came off a loss. They were ready to move on. I'm not advocating on behalf of that. I wish he still had his job, but just knowing what UFC management is like, this was, I would say, predictable, but not surprising.
It is what it is, basically.
It is what it is, man.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about somebody in the light heavyweight division who looks to be ready to return to action.
Hey, Luke and Dan. This is Lance from South Bend, Washington. My
South Bend,
question
Indiana?
is about Johnny Walker. So it looks like his shoulder's all healed up, and he is confident in fighting either John Jones or another top contender. Who would you like to see him fight next? Thanks, guys.
So Johnny Walker recently did a media scrum in Vegas, if I'm not mistaken, and he said he's healing up. He's almost 100%. He needs about four more months, and then he'll be good to go.
Yeah, shoulder injuries are no joke, dude.
Yeah. So potentially he could be fighting at the end of this year.
Yeah.
Who do you think he should fight? John Jones?
Well, coming off of an injury, no. But Lord knows, given how the division works, stranger things have happened. I would say probably the winner of this fight, maybe Dominic Reyes, depending on how Dominic Reyes stays active. When I say this fight, sorry, I mean Smith versus Gustafsson.
Yeah.
Or Dominic Reyes. That's what I would like to see. You're like, oh, you're killing off another contender. All right, man. Well, I mean, these guys have to fight each other at some point, right? Are we just going to sit here and just manicure all their careers boxing style, or are they going to mix it up a little bit? So I'm going to go with that. I'm going to say either one of those two guys. You?
I think he needs a name that, he beat some solid guys, got some impressive wins, but he has yet to beat a guy that's established, in the division, that's been a top contender, that's been a title contender. So, given the fact that Smith and Gustafsson, have fought for the title, I wouldn't hate that at all. But, I think I would like to see that John Jones fight. So I wouldn't like him to have like a long road there. I know some people want to, consider him, a top prospect and want to groom him. But I think, get one fight in there, beat a top guy and, fight John Jones or whoever wins the title.
You're just desperate for all these guys to fight John Jones tomorrow, I can tell.
Yeah. I want to see fights, man. I want to see title fights.
You want to see these guys take some L's before they're ready.
I mean,
Johnny Walker's actually the most...
How can you prepare for John Jones?
Yeah. Well, hold on. Johnny Walker's the more interesting one.
Yeah.
Because to me, I could see him getting viciously KO'd off trying something and it not working, and then he leaves himself widely exposed.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I can also see John Jones, who's so tactical, so cerebral, sets everything up, just being surprised by the donkery of Johnny Walker. Like, how do you prepare for a dude who just wants to moonwalk and then,
of course,
do the backpack kid floss or whatever, and he's just knocking fools out that way? Like, how do you deal with that? I don't know what the answer is,
Also, I feel like, John Jones, I have a feeling he's going to go up to heavyweight at some point. I don't feel like he has a ton of fights left at light heavyweight. So I would like to see that fight. I would like to see how it looks. And also, the more Johnny Walker fights, the more of a chance there is for, fights to drag out longer and go to a decision. And I kind of like that mystique and that mysteriousness that he has of like, who really is this guy? Because we have so little footage on him.
You know how that injury really derailed him because he was heating up so fast.
Yeah.
Not to say he couldn't. I think he'll probably, if he can keep winning, he'll just pick up where he left off. But it would have been nice for him to ride that momentum that he had really put together.
Yeah.
But He decided to. What was he doing? The worm? Is that what he did?
The worm, man. He messed up his shoulder.
Bro, you ever had a shoulder injury?
Nah, never. I mean, I have bad shoulders. Like if I move my shoulders around just from wrestling, like they'll start cracking and
Do
stuff.
they hurt when they crack?
No, not
So
yet.
if they don't hurt when they crack, what they'll tell you is you're fine.
Okay.
There's nothing they can do about popping and cracking that doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
It's the popping and cracking that hurts that they have to then address. Your boy has had just every shoulder rotator cuff, tore it, labrum, tore it. I've never broken any clavicle or anything like that, but I've had every problem. I've been to physical therapy 4 times. 3 of those times were for shoulders, and 2 of those times were for surgeries. I've had every problem.
Shoulder surgery.
Shoulder surgeries. Yeah, dude. Like it is. It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare to deal with.
Yeah, it's crazy. And he wants to continue doing the worm, man. If I was his camp, be like, yo.
Bro, you know what I mean? Just do the robot. You know, Ryan Jimmo used to do the robot. Rest in peace, Ryan Jimmo. And then he would do the splits.
Yeah.
I feel like that's enough.
Super impressive.
I feel like that's kind of enough, you know?
Or you know what? Just roll his video, you know? Just put it on the big screens after he wins.
Yeah.
With the worm. Like we saw it. It looks cool.
It's like Johnny
Don't need to
Walker.
see it again.
We believe you can dance.
Exactly.
You don't need to injure yourself to keep up appearances, buddy.
It's insane. It's insane.
All right, let's roll on, shall we?
All right, let's talk about a streaming platform.
Uh-oh.
Hey, Luke, this is Tamir from New York. I was just wondering, do you think the UFC is planning to get rid of Fight Pass completely, how they're putting all these old fights on YouTube for free now when you used to only have to go to Fight Pass to really get the whole event and whatnot? Thank you for your show. Thank you for all you do. And have a good day, Luke. Bye.
Shouts to New York City.
Yo, what's up with Fight Pass, man? I mean, it feels like with ESPN Plus, like you can get just about everything. I mean, they're still rolling out some prelims, but and there are other promotions on there, I guess.
There are. Cage Fury
It
Fighting
just seems like it's
Championship.
losing its value a little bit.
Shouts to Jessica Penny. Let's see. I think John Morgan and CM Punk, Mr. Phil Brooks.
Yep.
They called the last CFFC. I love CFFC, one of the great regional promotions. Everyone
haven't watched.
No,
No.
CFFC.
But I'll catch my Invicta on there.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, again, 2 promotions that provide a very valuable service, right?
Yeah.
For the thing. Okay, so what is the value to Fight Pass? There's a couple of them. One is that the UFC is probably wanting to keep it around because you never know what could happen with ESPN and ESPN Plus and how the growth of streaming might affect certain platforms or not. Here's the thing. And any time there is a new technology, Danny, that takes over the space, what ends up happening is there become a bunch of players that all get involved at once. And typically, though not always, there ends up being a bit of a return to the consumer as they all compete with each other. But what also ends up happening as new technology emerges is that all those new players, some of them begin to die out, and then you begin to coalesce around a handful of strong players. There's actually a lot of legal theory about antitrust in this regard. You know, why is it you only have a few tech giants? Well, because the rest of them all got put out of business. Why is it you have a few airlines? Partly there are some legal restrictions around that, but mobile carriers, because we haven't broken up a large telecom since Bell, AT&T. So here's my point. The UFC is probably waiting to see what happens. Who are going to be the winners and losers in this space? We'll just keep Fight Pass here to see how that plays out. The second part is that no one seems to pick up on is DAZN. If the UFC stays in business with Fight Pass and they keep CFFCs and they keep Muay Thai and Roy Jones boxing and blah, 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 blah. And yeah,
was Polaris on there or no?
Polaris was on there. EBI's Combat Jiu-Jitsu, everything else. Those are all properties that then can't sign with DAZN. It's simply a way to damage them from ever doing anything beyond Bellator or Combate, which, by the way, those are substantial assets.
Yeah.
But it hurts them in terms of offering, and then KSW and some other ones. But it hurts them in terms of offering a wider array of potentially important content. Thirdly, it's a pipeline. The ones who perform at Invicta or at CFFC, you're already on Fight Pass. It's a natural thing for the promoters to probably work with the UFC. I don't even know if this is ethical, but whatever, to then funnel them up all the way to the UFC. It creates a direct pipeline, both with the consumer and the promoter as well. So it's a lot of different things about what's the future going to be. Let's hurt a competitor, and let's make sure we continue. There was a New York Times article. Do you remember this a couple months ago, right when the UFC deal had matured, or maybe 3 months ago?
Regarding what?
The future of the Ultimate Fighting Championship in the ESPN era. And one of the things they said was they haven't done enough to secure the future of new stars. And I'm like, well, you can say how fruitful the efforts are if you want. That ain't even close to true. You have The Ultimate Fighter, which is not a good show, but might be a good pipeline for talent recruitment. You've got Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series. You got
That is now on ESPN Plus, right?
Right, but here's the point.
Not
I'm merely discussing recruiting talent. I don't care where they go. I'm talking about talent recruitment. You got those two. You got Looking for a Fight, which is the all-time dumbest show in America, but nevertheless, they at least find some prospects. You have just the general policy of signing people. You also have these other pipelines from Invicta, from CFFC, from everything. The idea that the UFC is not making a full-throated effort to find the next generation of talent. They're building performance institutes in China and Mexico. That is so demonstrably wrong. I couldn't believe the New York Times printed it. Anyway, neither here nor there. It's part of all these efforts.
Yeah, that's why you get your news at MMAFighting.com.
That's right.
Yep.
God damn it.
All right, let's talk about one. We didn't get to talk about one, some interesting things happened.
The least transparent organization in MMA. Least transparent.
I mean, we don't need to know weights, really. Like,
who does, right?
All right, let's talk about that.
Hey, Luke and Danny. This is Haroon from Madrid. I'm calling regarding the recent defeats of Eddie Alvarez and Sage Northcutt in ONE FC. Could it be that the company actually set up the fighters to have difficult matchups in order to show the world that they have the quality to compete with the UFC? What do you think? Is it unlucky beginnings for our UFC fighters, or maybe a smart coup from ONE FC? Thank you both for your hard work. Take it easy.
Hopefully that man's an Atletico Madrid fan, but
no, there's no chance.
Probably. I mean,
he doesn't hate. He doesn't hate his life.
Well, it's a superior team at the moment. I'll just say that much. Look at the Liga standings. Yeah. Anyways, we cannot answer that in the sense of, like, do we know the one actually set them up to lose? Obviously, we don't know, and there's no way of speculating that. But we can at least answer this. Was it good for one that, Eddie Alvarez and Sage Northcutt suffered losses?
This idea that they would sign people at probably not cheap contracts to then spike them, I'm not calling it the world's dumbest theory, but maybe the world's second dumbest theory behind Flat Earth. Like, Flat Earth is at the top, and then let's spike our expensive talent on their heads so that we can ruin our own investment. Probably number two. To answer the question in a more serious way, what they're asking is there any kind of potentially net positive reaction or takeaway from Eddie and Sage losing? The answer to that question is yes. Which is to say, yes, there are other really competitive spaces inside MMA. The UFC does not have a monopoly on all the competitive guys. Well, they have the overwhelming majority of competitive fighters through all the divisions, but they don't have all of them. The other thing you could say is the UFC is really good about getting rid of talent when it becomes too expensive or they're no longer useful for them, or they're kind of past it a little bit. Eddie Alvarez has been in a lot of wars, man, and it'd be foolish to write him off. It'd be foolish not to notice he's also been in a lot of wars. You have to kind of juggle that a little bit.
Yeah.
And in the case of Sage, everyone gets real sensitive about him when you make some kind of declaration. Dude, we're going to know relatively soon whether he's going to blossom into something. If you're 25 years old and you're 20 fights deep in your pro career and you're still kind of struggling at that level, it's probably all you're going to be. People would say, oh, he's got 10 years left. Yeah, if you start at 25, you have 10 years left. If you start at 16, you don't. Or you start at 20 or 18, whatever. You kind of know what you're up against at that point. You have to develop at a certain level. At 25, 26, you should be, again, you can get better past then. It's not that you're stuck there forever.
Yeah.
But you should have a pretty clear sense about what caliber of opponents you're able to take on, and you're going to know. So my hunch is that one probably overestimated what Sage was ready for, and the other one is Kaposa, Grabaka Hitman on Twitter. He was all over this. He thought that the Eddie Alvarez matchup was not a good one, that the other guy had a very strong chance of winning, and lo and behold, he did. So one was predictable, and the other one was, in hindsight, kind of understandable. Now, I'm not burying Sage. Everyone's like, oh, you're burying him? No, I'm not burying him. Let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. But the point being here is, donks, we're not too far from knowing.
Yeah. I mean, there's also some late bloomers. Like, if you look at Anthony Smith, like, we thought we knew who he was, and then he really came into his own in the last couple of years.
Highly rare.
And he's 30. But, yeah, you don't see that often, right? At this point in time, like, There's a big percentage drop off.
And also, he was a regional fighter.
That's true.
He wasn't.
Sage has been fighting elite.
Yeah, he's or at the highest
or high level,
bottom rung of the high level, which is still very tough.
Yep.
And the question is that best for development? Maybe if you had done the Anthony Smith route, where you're fighting on these Nebraska cards, that can be better for potential long-term development. Also, he had a weight cut issue too. So.
Yeah, maybe. It's very interesting. I remember, I think it was Diakesi recently said after he picked up a win over Joe Duffy, was it? He was like, yo, I thought about actually, like, maybe it was good for me to go back to the regional scene. Like, if the UFC kicked me out, maybe it was good to get back into the regional scene, and that's probably better for my future. So there's something to be said there. We'll find out. Yeah,
I just think one needs to recalibrate how they're booking him and where they book him. Not in a ring and not against a decorated striker.
Yeah, but I do think it's in some sort of ways there are some positives to that because look, for the longest time it was like anywhere a UFC guy would go, they would just destroy everybody else. Whereas these guys that were pretty good in the UFC go over to one, and all of a sudden they are coming short against one competition. So it does speak volumes to the sense that like one does have some really good fighters.
Sure. I call them least transparent because they're not transparent even a little bit. On the other hand, this is the point I also make about one. Dude, it's good to have an Asian promoter that does what they do. I think I mentioned this on the MMA Beat. They produce a lot of content. They find a lot of good fighters. They're giving opportunities to other fighters like a Demetrius Johnson and Sage and Eddie Alvarez. Misha Tate got hired by them to be an executive.
Exactly.
These are all positive developments.
I mean, we got Ben Askren. The UFC,
Ben Askren.
The UFC got Ben Askren.
And by the way, their rule set is better than the one we use in North America. They allow knees to the head of a downed opponent, and they don't have a 10-point must system. There are so many positive things you can say about one. I'm not bashing them in totality.
Yeah.
My only gripe is
there's a lot of good things about
them. There's a lot of good things about them. My only gripe is they just make a lot of weird-ass decisions, and there's no public accountability for it.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's talk about Khabib and where he ranks as the best lightweight of all time.
Ooh.
Danny, Luke, Khabib, Romani from the Bay Area. Yay. I'm back again. Hey, one thing I've noticed and observed with a lot of media, MMA media, is they don't give Khabib enough credit. I hear he's one of the best, this, that. Why not just say it like it is? I think he's the best lightweight of all time. We just all give him a round of applause and just say it. I don't see what the big deal is. Anyway, want to know you guys' feedback on that. Let the marathon continue. Yay.
I mean, could he be listening to E40 in the background? Dancing some hyphy? That's an interesting.
So
I don't know
we're not talking about the
eras.
greatest. We're not talking about the greatest. We're talking about best. So there's a big difference.
What is the difference?
Greatest, I think, comes down to a lot of achievement, right? Like, I would say the greatest lightweight is probably still BJ Penn, maybe.
Because he won 2 titles in 2 weight classes.
He won 2 titles and just achievement-wise. But skill-wise, I think, it comes out with time, right? The longer we're in this game of MMA, like, the harder it is for the old school guys to, stay in that chart of being the best, obviously just because MMA innovations and whatnot. But is he the best? I think the moment he fights Tony Ferguson, that's the moment we find out. Because if you look at both guys' resumes, they're pretty close. I mean, you could make an argument that Tony Ferguson has a better resume at this point.
So here's the deal. In terms of overall skill, he might be. Again, he was lacking in striking. Not as much as people say, but he's not going to join Glory anytime soon. So there's that. I have trouble comparing eras, in part because I haven't thought about the question very deeply. But the other one is that MMA is so different now than when BJ Penn was its best lightweight.
Yeah,
I think for me, as I try to noodle this through, the one holdup for me in declaring him, even though this might not even be fair, I'm thinking in real time.
Mm-hmm.
I need to see him face more of his better contemporaries. The Dustin Poirier fight is important.
Very important.
I need to see him fight Tony Ferguson.
Mm-hmm.
You beat those 2 guys, and I don't even know who could touch him at that point, right? I mean, that would be you beat Conor and everyone else before, and then you beat Dustin, who is like the best he's ever been, still in his 20s, and then you beat Tony Ferguson, who's in his mid-30s, but we all know what a crazy-ass fighter he is and how talented he is.
Good, yeah.
At that point, you begin to say, well, geez, man, this is an open and shut case, and it might already be. I guess I'm just thinking the reason why we maybe haven't anointed him as much is just that issue. It's like, let's see him.
We need to see more. Yeah. I mean, he just won the title, like, what, 2 fights ago?
Yeah, and remember, there was times where he had a rib injury, and he was like, oh, I'm going to be out forever, and I might not even come back, and blah, blah, blah. I just feel like if people haven't gotten on board with it, maybe one, we're sleeping. We could be sleeping. Sleeping on Hyphy because it sucks. Sleeping on Khabib because we're not thinking. The other one is the contemporaries issue. I think that has probably held him back a little bit.
He's on the verge, though, of becoming the best and the greatest, I feel.
Oh, yeah. Dude, undefeated at 27-0 in the toughest division in MMA.
I think he goes 30-0. He's probably the greatest.
So, I mean, that's just one of the most absurd things I've ever seen in my life. He's definitely the best grappler I've ever seen, probably in MMA. And that you could say, oh, what about Georges St-Pierre? Yeah, ahead of him. Georges St-Pierre was more of like a submission-based guard passer.
Yeah.
But in the way that Habib
just comes off more dominant.
Well, also, Habib has changed best practices.
Yeah.
Right? Habib is so good that other fighters from other divisions, by the way, not just his division, have looked at his wrist control, his passing style.
The Dagestani handcuff, right? Who coined that? Because that's been recently like surfacing.
I don't know. Maybe BJJ Scout. I don't know.
That was pretty good.
And they've looked at that and they've said, whoa, dude, like this is the next level of control.
Yeah.
And now you're watching everyone, if not copy him, take a lot of things from him. Like you couldn't do that with St. Pierre because a lot of it was just what he did. Dude, this guy is innovating in a way that almost no one else has in that space.
Yeah.
That is different.
By far the best grappler to ever compete at 155 pounds.
Well, then there's BJ Penn, right? So it's like, what kind? Because BJ Penn was the first guy to win the Mundials with the gi. It's a little bit different. Like
it is.
It's a hard question. People, here's the thing.
Yeah, it is tough.
There's fans watching being like, BJ Penn, really? Dude, if you were not around for BJ Penn's prime,
that's why it's so
you just can't imagine. You cannot believe how good he was. You cannot believe.
I clearly remember I was a big fan of Diego Sanchez. I've always been a huge fan of Diego Sanchez. This was before I was working in MMA media. And I remember he was killing it at 170 and he drops down to 155.
Yeah.
And at that time, BJ Penn was the guy.
Yeah.
But then you had Diego Sanchez, you know, and then Diego Sanchez gets past Joe Stevenson, and I really thought, I'm like, yo, this is the guy to dethrone BJ Penn, and then BJ Penn destroys him. One of the nastiest cuts we've seen in MMA, and it's just like what BJ Penn was doing back then was unbelievable. So that's why it's just a little bit sad to see, you know, where he is at now. That's why we talk about it so much. Yeah, but if you guys haven't seen it, go back to UFC Fight Pass and look at some of his title fights back in the day. I mean,
also on that card, Frank Mir fought Chuck Congo, and it was one of the nastiest overhand punch drop to a guillotine.
And then choked him out.
One of the best ones I've ever seen.
Yeah,
it's great.
All right, let's talk about I guess another lightweight, maybe welterweight. I don't know.
Hey, Luke. This is Kevin calling from Boston, Massachusetts. My question for you today is about Nate Diaz. So I'm a huge Diaz brothers fan. It's great to see Nate coming back. But what's really at stake for him in this fight with Anthony Pettis? Do you think he stays at 170? Or do you think he goes back to 155 with either a win or a loss? Thanks for taking my call, and I love your work. Thanks.
This is a weird one because I don't really have... I can't really say for certainty what's at stake for him. A title shot?
Nate Diaz?
Maybe. I don't know.
Nate Diaz?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've talked to some people close to Nate. The sense I get is he does want to compete. Did you see what he put out today?
No, but I did. Well, I saw it pop up on
UFC
on Twitter, but
UFC put out a highlight vid. It was a cool vid. By the way, this is so funny. If you guys didn't see this, so UFC put out a highlight vid of him, you know, saying cool things. He's just a cool guy, saying cool things and whatever, you know, and then the ninja stuff, that whole bit, saying he's back. And Nate reposted it because it is a cool vid.
Yeah.
But then goes,
right
I never left. I never went anywhere. I wasn't gone.
Yeah.
Which I thought was kind of interesting. So here's my thought on this, and talking to folks close to him and getting a sense of like what they're thinking. Apparently Nate wants to be active. Like he wants to fight a bunch.
Hopefully that's the case, man.
No, they're quite adamant about it. Like they're like in ways you probably won't believe. Like,
well, I mean, that's one thing that he wants to be active. The other thing is how he does with the UFC. You know, like
that relationship is so damaged. It's so damaged.
Hopefully they're at a place right now where we just see a bunch of fights from him.
Yeah. So the issue is, my thought is if he wins, he's going to look for title shots and or Conor or big fights. Like give him a big fight at 170, give him a big fight at 155, just something where it's a great degree of visibility. But I think he's going to be probably pickier than they're letting on. So I think it's just going to be either title shots in other weight classes, Conor, or something else kind of interesting on the in-between. But, like, getting in the queue and then just doing what, like, Cerrone does.
No, he's in the Moneyweight division.
There's
man.
no chance of that happening. None.
Yeah, he's not.
But they tell me he wants to be active, man. They tell me, like, he's actually quite serious about fighting on a regular basis. But
what's more likely? He gets a title shot at lightweight or at welterweight?
Honestly, whatever.
They try to get him to fight for 170 gold.
And they said that they didn't give him a fight against Tyron Woodley. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. They offered him a fight against Tyron Woodley, and then he put up a demand for how much money he wanted, which, by the way, if I told you, you would laugh at how little it is. And they said no. So that is the reality. They can say whatever they want to the media. That is a fact. So I don't know. I mean, this is the other part. It's like maybe Nate does want to be active, but if you're like the only reason they're fighting Pettis is because the two teams worked it out and they figured it out. Now maybe he can keep doing that. Like what? Like whatever it takes.
Might be his own matchmaker.
I'm like Rich Piana. Whatever it takes.
Yeah, for real.
I just don't know. I don't know what to say. Rest in peace, Rich Piana.
We'll see what happens. All right. Another question. Then we move on to the new batch. Or actually, you know what? I'm gonna save this question so when I go to call Alexander Gustafsson, you can answer.
Okay.
It's more towards you.
Okay.
So let's talk about the other questions that we left off last week, which are still pretty relevant, I think.
All right.
Yeah, this is David Sandoval calling from Richmond, California. I just wanted to know what you think the win over Kevin Lee does for Rafael Dos Anjos. He was on a bit of a skid, but he looked absolutely great in that performance, and just wanted to hear your thoughts on how you think it played out and what will happen for him in the future.
What's next for RDA, man?
So the good news is it put him back in a winning space, which was important. I don't think he's ever dropped 3 in a row. A couple times he's dropped 2 in a row.
Yeah.
So it was good. I don't know how mumuch it does for him in terms of like bumping him up the queue. He was already kind of third. Maybe he gets him.
Stayed third, man. That win didn't really.
It didn't. Yeah, it wasn't a needle mover in that regard. But to me, it was just so impressive. I've talked about it. I've never seen a guy have this many tough fights in this many weight classes with this many bad weight cuts and not be shot-born.
Yeah.
He's
like 36, 37. Like
I'm not sure how old he is, but it's unbelievable what a competitor he is, man. It's incredible. My thought is, like, it depends when he wants to come back and who's available. Obviously, that's the big consideration all the time. Wonder Boy says he's eyeing a fight with Darren Till. I wonder how he might feel about a fight against Dos Anjos. I never know if it's Dos Anjos or Dos Anjos. All these years, RDA. So I guess whoever's in that space, I just don't feel like it meaningfully moved him towards a title shot. Tyron Woodley's probably going to be looking for a new opponent. That might be an interesting one because remember, he already fought Lawler and beat him.
Yeah.
So RDA versus Tyron Woodley is kind of an interesting test as well. Like, but folks forget this. Tyron Woodley is a bad mamma jamma. He's also 37. It's a relevant question to wonder how much longer can he be elite? Maybe a little while longer. But we need to find that out.
RDA is 34, by the way. I don't hate that fight at all, but it is a weird spot because he's ranked third. Above him is Colby, who's probably gonna fight Usman next.
Yeah, probably.
Right?
Yeah.
Then Tyron Woodley, but I don't know how bad is his injury.
Who, Woodley?
Yeah.
I think it's just, I don't think he tore or broke anything.
Yeah,
I think it's more like chronic, which means it just takes time to heal.
Yeah.
So if depending on how they're feeling, like if RDA wants to wait a few more months, timelines might work out, man.
Yeah. I say that's the fight to make.
By the way, and I know, look, I don't like the filthy animals thing that Colby Covington does. I just don't like it. And I've told him this personally.
Yeah,
I don't like it. It ain't for me. However, I want to send a shout out to Colby because I tried to do something with him this past week. It didn't work out where folks don't realize this. As I said before, it's Memorial Day. Like everyone's like, oh, I get messages on Instagram. These are very nice messages. Don't misunderstand me.
Yeah.
They're like, thank you for your service. I'm like, save it for Veterans Day because this is about Memorial Day. This is about those who have died making the ultimate sacrifice. Colby Covington, it turns out, I got a call from the Navy. They wanted to set some things up. The USO didn't call up Colby Covington. He called up the Navy and their public affairs department and asked if he could fly himself to New York for Fleet Week and meet with sailors and Marines who were here as part of that. And they agreed. He didn't collect a dime, paid his own way, lodging and transportation, and met with them on various battleships, destroyers, in the street, did an exercise with them in Times Square, blah, blah, blah. And I come to find out he's been doing this not for Fleet Week, but for various other bases in the area.
Yeah.
or in the contiguous United States. He's been doing this for years. They haven't paid him one time to do it. There's a lot of people who do a lot of jibber jabber about how much they care about America's armed forces.
Just throw an Instagram post.
Yeah, and what they do is they vote for people who don't do any reforms for the VA. They don't really know anybody who's ever been in the military. They themselves have never been in the military. They don't know anything about veterans killing themselves in parking lots to bring attention to their situation. They don't show up to Walter Reed. I've been to Walter Reed. I went to the old Walter Reed. I've been to the new Walter Reed. They don't ever put their money where their mouth is. I don't love everything that Colby says when he promotes a fight. I cannot name another UFC fighter who has ever shown as much respect to our armed forces, both the fallen, the veterans, and the active service members, as Colby Covington. No one else is going to say it because the MMA media never wants to give him credit. I will give him credit. I want everyone to know I am saying this because it needs to be said.
Yeah, you got to respect that.
Or you don't, but I'm going to. So there you go.
All right, let's talk about Kevin Lee. I feel like this question was obviously relevant right after he lost, but I feel like it's more relevant now because there's some other questions popping up about, where he should be training and whatnot.
Hi, this is Justin calling out of Houston, Texas. Love the show.
DJ
Since
Screw.
Kevin Lee lost to RDA, where do you feel he goes from here? Anyway,
Kevin Lee?
love the show, guys.
Swish a house up in Houston, Texas. Magnificent about his cash. Let's see. 281-330-8004. Whose number is that, Danny?
Who's?
281-330-8004.
No idea.
Mike Jones. Remember Mike Jones still tipping? Still tipping on fofos?
Nope.
Wrapped in fofos? All right, well.
What year is that?
2004-ish, 5-ish.
That's when I moved to the U.S.
Is that right? Yeah.
2004.
Slim Thug. You don't know Slim Thug? Paul Wall? Swish
I
a
know
house?
Paul Wall,
Okay. All right. All right. So I can't remember. It was about Kevin Lee. Did you hear what Rogan said about it? I thought it was actually kind of interesting.
Talking to Brandon Schaub?
About Kevin Lee, though.
Yeah.
Rogan's theory, and Rogan's got to fill 3 hours of airtime. So like me, I have to do an hour after, like 3 hour show for this. 90% of the things I say on my next show are going to be wrong. You understand? Like, it's just not possible to say right things all the time. And I know that better than anybody, or most anyway. But he did say something I really thought was, I don't know if it's right, but I thought it was smart and interesting.
Yeah.
He thinks that Lee just never really recovered, not so much as a human, but as a fighter with the loss to the connection to Robert Follis.
Yeah.
And that he needs a guru to guide him, like a Duke Rufus, or he had specifically noted Faraz Zahabi. Faraz worked with George St. Pierre, who had a bit of a punch you, take you down, grind you out style, which, hey, like that's exactly what Kevin Lee does. Now, I don't know exactly if that's what Kevin Lee needs. I'm not in the camp. It's just hard for me to understand what's missing. Hard to call that a bad idea from Joe Rogan. I actually thought that was really kind of interesting. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I thought the same. And look, Kevin Lee is 26 years old, so he's kind of like similar to the Sage Northcutt space where, like, yeah, there's still tons of room for him to, like, make changes and improve and become, a champion. But, like, you got to start making those changes now, man, because 26 and you start getting close to 27, 28, all of a sudden you're a year or two away from 30, Yeah. So, yeah, it's very interesting, and I'd like to see him go to another camp, to be honest, just to get some new looks and see, and he doesn't have to do. He doesn't have to do a full move. Just go out there and see what it's like. Remember, Sage Northcutt was doing that early on. He went to TriStar. I don't know if he ever went to Albuquerque. He might have, but then he went to Team Alpha Male. He tried a few spots. He was also in Florida. He tried a few spots until he was like, okay, Team Alpha Male is where it's at for me. So I'd like to see that from Kevin Lee, some experimentation and, see how he feels with other coaches and other methods,
Yeah, I don't know what ails him. It's always weird. I mean, like MMA.
And we know that when his coach passed away, that was big.
Had to be big. MMA fans always ask me like, "Oh, what's wrong with their camp?" And it's like, well, the results aren't what they are supposed to be. So clearly something is off.
Yeah.
But how do you determine that if you're not there to watch the camp? Like, you need to know. Unless the camp has like many fighters that are all doing incompetently, then I guess you could make a generalization. But like, dude, his coaches, they're good. Like Dewey Cooper, that's a good ass coach, man. So it's hard to, you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's also
a weird
could
one.
be a million factors.
It's a weird one.
We don't know, but like we will only know until he starts trying different things, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Maybe he goes to different camps and he's the same fighter.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes I realize, you know what? Maybe I'm best at home. Pettis did the rounds and then circled back to Duke Roufus, you know?
Exactly.
So who knows?
Yeah. All right. Well, we talked a little bit about Woodley, but let's talk about Lawler because he's the other side of that equation.
Wabby wah.
Hey, Luke, Danny, Nino from Washington Township, New Jersey. I had a question here for you. With Tyrone Woodley out of his fight with Robbie Lawler, who do you think should pick up the fight? Do you think it should be Darren Till, Leon Edwards, Ponzinibbio? I just want to know your thoughts.
All right, so this is a better question for you because you know me, I don't like playing matchmaker that much.
Yeah.
But that one, any of those seem fine to me. I never get moved by these questions, you know?
You know, I don't have a specific person I'd like to, single out a specific fighter, but what I would like to say is that I'd like to see Robbie Lawler take one of the young guys. You know what I'm saying? Like with Tyron Woodley, like that fight was fine, but I don't think. I think I'd like to see him either against Vicente Luque or Leon Edwards, like one of those guys that deserves and like needs, a big name opponent. And look, either it puts one of those guys up as far as like them becoming a top contender, or we just know what we've always known, that Robbie Lawler's super game and he's still in it. So, I'd like to see that. So I think I'm more leaning towards the Leon Edwards, Vicente Luque, those kind of guys. But look, Mike Perry, that wouldn't be bad either. That'd actually be kind of fun. So.
All right.
You want to talk about Pico or Rose Namajunas?
Pico.
All right.
That's more interesting at the moment.
Hey, Luke and Danny. This is Kurt from Connecticut. My question is about Aaron Pico.
Mm-hmm.
It was recently announced that Aaron Pico had switched camps to Jackson Wink. He's also coming off that bad knockout loss to Henry Corrales. And it seems as though he's already signed on for a fight against Adam Bullock, who's like 12-0 stud prospect himself. What do you think about the quick turnaround for Pico, especially after the camp switch? I figured he would have waited a while. Thanks, guys. Love the show. Keep up the great work.
This is one of the most interesting stories in MMA right now.
I feel like it's been about 6 months because he lost in January.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't feel like it's that quick of a turnaround. The only thing I would say it's kind of quick is the fact that he switched camps and all of a sudden, right after the news broke that he's now with Jackson Wink, now he has a fight lined up. I guess that's the only thing I would say. But as far as recovery wise from a knockout, it's been 6 months. I feel like that's a good amount of time. No,
there's been a criticism of Jackson's that I never shared. I mean, every camp is not perfect, and so there's always one thing or the other you could say. I remember when John Jones went over to Jackson's, and they had said they had taken the fun and spontaneity out of John. So, for example, John did all these incredible spinning elbows and whatnot.
Right, yeah.
And he had said he learned them from YouTube, and he had used them to great effect in fights. In fact, it was that spinning elbow that ended up being a bit of a Hail Mary in the Gustafsson fight that probably saved him in that fourth round. And so there is something to be said for letting a fighter be who they are. On the other hand, the reason why that criticism is hollow to me is because you just can't argue. You just cannot argue that John was a better striker when he walked in the door, or that was a better style for him long term than what he has now. He has such command of the fundamentals, and what I mean by that is the most important parts of the game. I've talked about it ad nauseum on the Monday Morning Analyst, that it was such a massive benefit from him. Now, is there a case to be made that maybe they could have kept some of the funner parts of what he was doing as a more honoring his natural instincts? Maybe you could make that. Yeah. But in general, what they took was a sort of wild animal and they refined him into a very sharp sword.
Yeah.
Pico, hold on, let me finish.
Yeah,
Pico seems like the guy who could really benefit from that. Mm-hmm. He seems like a guy who's got every bit of ability in the world. You ever met Aaron Pico, by the way?
No, I have not.
Maybe the nicest guy in MMA, and that's saying something.
Yeah.
Super nice kid, devoted, just wants to work and be good. And I did think Antonio McKee was a super underrated coach, but maybe not the right one for him. He needs somebody that's going to take that wildness and refine it, sharpen it, remove some of the more toxic elements of it, and turn him into a sharp sword. Mm-hmm. That's what he needs. To me, moving to ATT, I'm sure that would have been good. Moving to AKA, maybe that would have been good. I could have thought of no better place for him to go than Jackson's.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with your assessment. But do you think this is a quick turnaround for him? And also, what do you think about his
that's the only part I'm
opponent?
like a little,
Adam Borics is legit, man. He's undefeated.
Yep, he's a good fighter. That's the only part that I'm like, well, I would have liked to seen you work on your game a little bit more. Yeah, I don't like that part. I'll be honest, I don't like that part. But the move to Jackson's, it's not just the move. It's the right kind of move. That's exactly what he needs. So hopefully he's had enough time to acclimate. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. But I would like to see him against just donks at this point. Like,
yeah, he needs a tune-up.
Yeah,
he needs a tune-up. Adam Borics is not a tune-up.
Nope.
So
yeah, I guess we'll see what happens there. All right, let's talk about the fans. This is a bit of a long question, so I'm gonna have to cut it short. But
fans.
Hey guys, this is Chris from Glendale, Arizona. Hey, just wondering if you guys have sensed a falling interest among the hardcore fan base. I've been watching the UFC since 2007. Consider myself a hardcore fan, watch every card every weekend, get all the pay-per-views, that kind of thing. I just find myself losing interest. A couple weeks ago, the first time I didn't watch the prelims. Then last weekend, I didn't watch the prelims. I was going to go to a bar to watch the fights and just kind of went down the card, and I just didn't find it that interesting. And even this weekend, probably won't watch it. Just finding myself losing interest in it. I think obviously oversaturation is a big thing, but even the stuff with Conor McGregor, I mean, I don't even really care if he ever comes back. Just kind of a sideshow to me.
All right, I'm gonna cut it right here. First of all, I really don't believe him that he doesn't really care if Conor McGregor comes back. I guarantee you.
But the point is, he feels that way right now. I agree. In the end, he would come back
because of all this, business stuff and all the waiting. But when that man has a date and an opponent, this caller's going to buy the pay-per-view.
Okay. So how do you feel about his question?
I feel like I think there is misplacement of perhaps the words we're using as far as like hardcore's losing interest. I still think the hardcore fans you're always going to be, for the most part, a hardcore fan. I just think there's so much MMA now that you just can't watch all of it. So you're going to pick and choose, but don't feel like you're not a hardcore if you're not watching every single event. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I think we should just call it what it is. Yeah, of course the hardcores have left. I've been doing this long enough to know exactly that's what's happened. And I've been watching, I didn't see till UFC 4. I was in Blockbuster, so I'd missed the first 4 or 5. And then I cycled back around college, so let's say 2001 or so, and then really got into it around 03, 04, and then started writing about it, around that time. Well, a little bit later, but you get the idea. So, like, I was there pre-Tough Boom and then post-Tough Boom. All the people I watched MMA with all are gone now. They're all gone. And a new generation.
My brother was a huge fan, and he doesn't really watch
So then a new generation came with Conor and Rousey and John Jones. John was a bit of a bridge, but certainly with Conor and Rousey, they all came, and they're cycling out now too. So the question is, who's going to be the next one to bring that up? I don't know the answer to that. But yeah, dude, the UFC, folks don't realize this. The UFC used to have a product where they didn't want you to pick and choose. If it was a UFC product, they wanted you to watch it. And eventually they said, we don't really care. You can pick and choose. In fact, Dana White was explicit. If you don't like it, don't watch it, which doesn't seem like the best sales pitch, but it's the one he made. And so the fans listened, and they tuned out. There is just no doubt about it that we have lost 2 generations of fans. We've since replaced them with some other ones, and it's gotten more mainstream, and I think as a consequence, to a degree, more accessible. But yeah, dude, like being a hardcore fan in this sport, you are asked to do a lot. A lot of your time, a lot of your money, a lot of just your bandwidth. And people burn out and then they leave. And oftentimes they don't come back. We just replace them with a new generation.
Yeah.
So what he's talking about, I have seen, it's like the Matrix. The Neo was the 7th anomaly. I have seen that anomaly several times through. This is the natural process. I just keep watching because this is how I pay my mortgage. But I've been burned out on MMA for years. Years. I find different ways to entertain myself. I love the breakdowns. I love the big fights. But yeah, dude, it's designed to burn you out. So people get burned out.
Yeah, I feel like we need to redefine what a hardcore is, because I feel like some people might not feel like, oh, I'm no longer a hardcore because I'm not there watching every single event. it's kind of impossible to watch every single event and keep up with all the news. I mean, I do this for a living, and there's times that, like, I miss news and things. It's just like,
yeah, but
there's so much going on.
He's talking less about a classification, the caller, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
And more about his own personal burning desire. Dude, there were times where I just couldn't sleep at night thinking about the next day's fights. I sleep like a baby these days. Well, except for my baby, I sleep like a baby. But you get the idea. Like,
yeah.
Okay, when if John has a fight against Cormier, I will be thinking about that for weeks, or something else like that. But the point being is, dude, we have to call it. We cannot sugarcoat this. Absolutely, generations of fans have been burned out of it. The UFC's idea is let's just dump the guts on the let's dump the guts on the White Owl and then just restock it. That's just the whole It's the whole idea.
But I feel like we're also speaking about the moment. Wait till those summer fights roll out, man, because we got some really good bookings coming up.
Yeah, but Jose,
then all of a sudden,
you don't buy that they've gone. Like,
no, 100%. I mean,
some come back intermittently.
Yeah.
New generations come.
Yeah.
But like, dude, all the people I used to have UFC parties with, they don't. Not only do they not come over, they don't watch MMA anymore.
Yeah.
That's a real.
No, yeah, I agree
thing.
With that. It's true. But when a big fight rolls out, if you're a hardcore and you're a fan of MMA, or at some point you were a fan, you'll come back. You'll come back. You might not be there for the UFC on ESPN Plus cards, but you'll be there for the big fight.
And also, people always ask me like, "Oh, do you have a favorite fighter?" I used to when I watched less and I didn't cover it for money. But I'm honestly, I think I have a more sustainable relationship to MMA now. Before I like needed MMA and I loved it and it was like this thing I was like all in on.
Yeah.
And that you can't keep that. It's not possible. So to me, I have this, like, for example, like I have a view that troll culture has overtaken MMA culture.
Yeah, it's big.
And in particular on social media. I think actually social media has damaged the sport. It's a longer argument I'd like to make, but I really believe that. So all of these beefs, they're good for the game in the sense that they facilitate the kinds of actions that make the beast work.
Yeah.
But they're bad for attachment. And what's good for attachment is, in my humble opinion, you don't have to watch my breakdowns. Watch Dan Hardy's, watch the Weasels, watch Jack Slack, watch whoever. Falling in love with fighting is much more sustainable than falling in love with MMA. And in particular, the culture around MMA today.
Or fighters, because they come and go,
Fighters too.
And if you're into MMA, if that's what you're into, like.
And they'll break your heart too, so.
Yeah. Very true. All right, let's talk about Stipe versus Cormier.
Okay.
Or should I say Cormier versus Stipe, actually.
Hey, what's up, Luke and Danny? My name's Chris. I'm calling from Montana, good old Northwest. Anyways, my question is, with this Stipe and DC fight coming up, if Stipe wins, does that leave a rubber match? Does DC want to try to break the tie, or does he retire with a loss? Does he fight again like somebody like Ngannou or something like that? That'd be crazy to see, right? I think there has to be a rubber match. All right, guys. Big fan of the show. Take care.
Yeah, absolutely has to be a rubber match. Of that, there could be no doubt. Here's what I'm waiting for, Danny.
Yeah.
What if DC wins again and it's very close, but, DC wins? I bet you there are going to be people saying there should be a third fight. I'm calling it now. I'm not saying that's the way the fight's going to go.
Stipe will sit out for 6 months, and then we'll skip another contender, and they'll make that fight happen.
No, thank you. If now if Stipe wins, rubber match it up.
No, man. I really, dude. Stipe fans will say that because they're Stipe fans, but I think if Cormier beats Stipe, it's 2 in a row, man. It's 2 in a row. Like, that's done.
Here's the thing. This is what folks forget about the first one. That fight was signed in January. They didn't fight till July. You had 6-7 months to get ready for it. And, you lost inside the first round. There was no case for a rematch. People are like, oh, he was the winningest of all time. But at 3, which is better than everyone else, I grant you. But it's not some like Anderson Silva like streak.
Exactly.
He had tons of prep time, and he lost by stoppage in the first round. There was no case for a rematch whatsoever. Now, if you lose a second time, where you've had all this time to prepare and think and plot and plan, and you lose that one, don't anybody out there dare say, and also unless there's like a crazy judging call.
And also the circumstances in which this fight is being made. It's not like he went out there, picked up a couple wins, and all of a sudden you're like, maybe Stipe can beat him,
He sat out.
He sat out.
Which is fine. That's his call, but
yeah, it's fine. I mean, it was it was 100% the right call to make because at the end of the day, he was the guy that got the title shot, right?
Well, that's debatable, but okay, I see your point.
He got what he wanted, right?
Yes, it was a gamble. It was a gamble.
It was a gamble,
and
it paid off. So he did. I mean, I guess in my opinion, he did the right thing.
But I'm saying it's like a Rose and Joanna situation where she gets smoked in the first round. They redo it. It was close, but that.
But Joanna had been champion for a while.
Okay, but I'm saying, but they redid it, and it was much closer the second time. But Rose clearly ended up taking it. I don't want to hear a peep about one after that. Now, if Stipe wins, then we can figure something else different.
Of course.
And by the way, he might because Stipe is really good.
Might. And then all of a sudden, third fight could be. I think it would be the fight to make. As this caller notes for sure.
All right. One more, and then you want to call Mr. Gustafsson?
Yeah, actually, this is going to be all you. I'm going to, meanwhile, call Gus, and then, if we need to roll out another one, we will.
Okay.
What's up, Danny and Luke? This is Clinton from Phoenix, and I just wanted to hear your thoughts on UFC 238. The UFC is literally marketing Tony Ferguson versus Donald Cerrone as the people's main event. This card has not one but 2 title fights on it, and I feel like it's almost disrespectful to Cejudo, Moraes, Shevchenko, and I for them to be telling the fans you should be more hyped about Ferguson and Cerrone than the 2 fights that are coming after it that have belts on the line. Why would they go this route rather than just having Ferguson Cerrone headline a card so it could have the spotlight that it deserves? Tell me your thoughts. Looking forward to the show. Love you guys. Thanks for everything you do.
So it's an interesting question. First of all, are they specifically calling it the people's main event? If so, it's a little bit of gimmick infringement from Ariel, but or not from him, but of him that they'd be taking from him. Excuse me. If that's the case, I don't know if that's what they're doing. I don't pay attention to the marketing, so I'm a little bit removed from that one. But hello, I don't know that that's better than the main event, but it's probably better than the co-main event, at least on paper. Dude, Tony Ferguson is. Okay, I mean, he had the interim belt, but in terms of the overall, the lineal belt, he's maybe the best UFC fighter to never hold a lineal belt. I mean, he's a phenomenal talent versus Cowboy Cerrone, who has more wins than any other UFC fighter ever. That is a special contest. That the fact that the other ones have belts, you need to respect that. You need to acknowledge that they're higher on the card as a consequence. But in terms of your marketing, why wouldn't you go with your strongest hand? That's a much stronger hand as a marketing proposition than Shevchenko versus I don't think it's disrespect. I think it's about what works. We kill the UFC for improper promotion all the time. And yeah, you would want to see them respect the co-main event enough that those don't get left behind. Okay, fine. But lead with the strongest spear, man, like the sharpest sword. That Ferguson, Cerrone, right up there. Well, it depends on your perspective a little bit about Cejudo and Moraes, but yeah, that's one of the better. Dude, that's a phenomenal contest. I would be a little bit upset if they were kind of pushing that one to the back burner. Now, I'd be more upset if they were putting Ferguson versus Cerrone ahead on the card, or I should say higher up on the card than a title fight. That would be a little bit messed up. But in terms of a marketing effort, sure. That's what's going to sell. That's what people want to see. Tony Ferguson, by the way, also deserves some promotion. Here's a guy who hasn't lost since, Holloway and Poirier fought the first time. I mean, it's been 7 years or something. Some incredible streak in MMA's toughest division. That guy deserves some praise too. So I need to see the marketing material before I can say it's Luke Thomas approved, but if what you're describing is accurate, I more or less don't have a problem with it.